As John mentioned, I have kind of an different background. I was an engineer by training, and we are going to do a video on engineering. I'm shooting it right after this, so if you're interested in engineering, and if you're interested in entrepreneurship, I can tell you that engineering is a great background. But I was one of those engineers that never designed anything, which a lot of people told me was probably good for the world, that I didn't design things. I went right into sales and marketing, and eventually ran companies of various sizes, as large as 400 people. And my most recent company that I ran was actually a venture capital-backed company, so much more entrepreneurial because we were small, trying to raise money, which we did successfully. And I had always told my boss, when I moved to Northeast Ohio in '96, I had told somebody that worked in economic development, a woman named Dorothy Bonnick, that I really thought that I'd be working with a lot of other companies, and I wasn't. I mean, I came here, my office was in Valley View, so not far from here, and I went and did my thing, and it could have been in Cleveland, it could have been in Detroit, it could have been anywhere. And I had told her that I might want to do something in economic development to sort of in my career, and a lot of people at the end of their career will do something like that. I wanted to do it a little bit earlier in my career. Well, I got a call from her, and I was supposed to move to Boston from Northeast Ohio, and she said, well, I just got money, so I can do this now, because one thing I'm going to talk about, these things all need money. They take investment. And so I joined an organization called NorTech and did a bunch of different things. So I noticed your course syllabus, almost everybody you're going to talk to I've worked with in some way or shape or form in the last 8 years. So I've done a lot in economic development. I can tell you that we've gone through a transformation in this region that I would say from a high-tech point of view, to give you a sense, we are about half the size of the Boston area in terms of a metro area. So if you look at not just Cleveland, but Cleveland through Akron, the entire area compared to the Boston area, we're about half their size population-wise. I would say their high-tech economy is 10 times ours. I mean, that's how big of a difference there is and there was. So that's not as good as we want. Now, we're better at things like machining and metals and other things, but nonetheless, they were really in the right place as compared to where Northeast Ohio was. Over the last 8 years, I would say that if I was an early-stage entrepreneur, and that means an entrepreneur who's just starting out, and a lot of times these entrepreneurs raise a lot of money. And so you just don't walk off, you don't start a company and do it with just your own money, because they call that bootstrapping. Is that a term that you guys have used? So bootstrapping is when you actually can take your own money and build a company. So you might start a restaurant, well, you use the profits from the restaurant to invest into the next one. That can be done. In high tech, it's hard. It's harder to do that. So often you raise money. And I'm sure if you had some of the people in the medical devices area talk to you, you had Tom Sudo. Those companies have to raise money from investors, often for what's called venture capital. And if I was an early stage entrepreneur, just getting started with a couple of people, I would rather be right now, I'd rather be in Northeast Ohio than in Boston. And that is a huge change from 8 years ago. And the reason why is we have all these structures. We have ways to get money to the right companies. It's very competitive, but we have ways to get money to those companies. And in Boston, we don't have any structures like that. Now, what they do have is if you're trying to raise $5 million, so if you're at that point where you want to raise a lot of money, I'd still rather be in Boston. Because I'll give you a sense. I went by a building. I was on the way to a wedding with my daughter and now son-in-law, and I pointed to a building from the highway. And I said, you see that building? And they said, yeah. I said, there's more venture capitalists in that building than there are in the entire state of Ohio. And it's not close. I mean, so the point is we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of structures. But there is a sense of this area. We are getting credit all over the country for what we've done in economic development here to really take what we used to use the term Rust Belt. We really try not to use Rust Belt because it doesn't help us. Just like we always make fun of our own teams, although the Browns are doing great right now, that we really have to think of ourselves as a growth kind of an area, and we are investing in it more than any other region that I know of in the country, and we've gotten a lot of credit for that. So one of the areas that I'm now involved with is called the TechBelt Energy Innovation Center, and this is a very new incubator. And you've probably learned a little about incubators. They're places to nurture your company. If you're an entrepreneur, and you guys are all talking about entrepreneurship, it's still about you. It's not about this, but these are just structures that should help you. So we will do three things. One is energy and natural resource incubation and acceleration. So we're focused on energy, and energy can be new alternative energy like wind and solar and fuel cells, or it can be energy that we're talking about, the huge amounts of shale gas, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, particularly in the eastern part of the state. or it could be just modernizing the grid, because that's one of the problems we have as a country is our grid infrastructure. We also will put together what's called the Shared Resource Technology Center, and I'll describe this to you, and what I'm going to talk about next week, which is the other half of my responsibility, is also a Shared Resource Technology Center. So I'll introduce that concept to you. And then we do a lot of regional outreach, education, and some entrepreneurial support. And regional outreach and education is what we're doing right here. So I'm like sort of checking my box for that. But also we do a lot of entrepreneurial support. I spend a lot of time right now coaching companies, with helping them with, so if you were an entrepreneur, where I say, well, what are we going to do to make sure that you can present to an investor and you can get the money? Because if you can't get the money, it doesn't matter. And so we do a lot of coaching of entrepreneurs on their business plans. And I can say where we started is we got funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. These things all take money. And sometimes it's from philanthropy, so it's from foundations. So you've had somebody, I think, from the Burton D. Morgan Foundation come in and speak. So that might be a place where you get your money. So for example, when I went into economic development, she had just gotten funding from what was called the Fund for Our Economic Future, which was an organization of different philanthropic groups to give money. Sometimes you get money from the government. In this case, we had a Department of Energy grant that was given to us to support the state of Ohio. Specifically, since it came from Congressman Tim Ryan, it was designated that it was going to be in his district, in Warren and Youngstown are in his district. And we also have to get a lot of local supporters. So this is an early stage incubator. We physically do not have a building yet, for example, but still these are the people we've already raised money from, and some of these are small, fairly modest. If somebody gives us $10,000, for example, it's a modest gift. It helps, but it doesn't keep us going. And so we spend a lot of time raising money from different people. So where we are today is we're working today as part of what's called the JumpStart Entrepreneurial Network, and I worked for JumpStart as part of my career in economic development, and I'm sure you must be having somebody from JumpStart speaking at some point. And what happened is that when we use the dollars from the Department of Energy to coach entrepreneurs, we can also help JumpStart raise money from the state. So there's a little bit of a gamesmanship in that when you have money from one source, so the government gives you money, they say, well, we want to see that someone else is willing to put money up. And so this kind of helps JumpStart with that. So we're coaching entrepreneurs in energy. So I'll give you an example of a couple of the energy companies I'm working with now. One has a unique storage system to connect to the grid. So basically let's say a McDonald's is a great example. McDonald's pays more for electricity during the day. At home, your parents all pay the same price for electricity. If you run your dishwasher in the morning, or you run your dishwasher at 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, it costs the same. Well, that's not true for commercial customers. McDonald's pays more during the day, during peak hours. And if you just think about when do we use the most electricity? About 8 o'clock in the morning, it goes up and it peaks and it stays up. And then in the afternoon, particularly in the summer, it goes way up because the air conditioners all turn on. And it stays high until 5 o'clock at night, and then it starts drifting down because the industrial plants start to close. So if you think about if you're running a McDonald's, almost all of your business is during that time, is during that peak kind of a time. So what you're doing is you're paying more for that electricity then. So this company has a product that can store the energy at night. So they buy the energy at night when it's cheap, and it's really just a battery. And then they use that energy to power that McDonald's through the morning rush and through the afternoon rush and possibly through some of the evening part of their cycle. And then if they have to buy electricity, they can, but then they go back and redo the cycle. I'm also working with a couple of solar companies that are actually trying to make solar energy more efficient, because right now solar energy doesn't really pay off that well. I mean, it has a lot of promise, but it doesn't pay off. So in 2013, we will actually open up an incubator space in downtown Warren, which I'm guessing that none of you have ever been to. It's a small town on the eastern part of the state. It's probably as hard hit a town as you can imagine in terms of economy. This is a town that depended on steel, and that you can just see in this town there's these beautiful homes where all the managers for steel used to work, and they're all gone. It just has changed. So this really is a real part of redevelopment of this area, and we'll offer incubator space. So if you start a company and you're in energy, we can coach you and work with you. But if you say, you know, I need a place to be, you can actually locate your company inside our incubator. So now I'm going to talk about a thing called the Shared Resource Technology Center. So if you're a small company, you need access to some really involved technology equipment, and it's pretty expensive. It's tough to buy. There's not a lot of places where you can rent it. So the idea of a shared resource technology center, it's usually a nonprofit, but it offers you access to that equipment. So if you say, I need to use this piece of equipment, that piece of equipment, they say at fairly modest rates, it's available to you. Typically, it focuses on a specific technology area. So the second one is what TBEIC does. It's grid connectivity. So what we're trying to do is when someone's trying to put together a product that's going to connect to the power grid. So imagine if you guys see the various windmills throughout the area. Well, you don't just connect one of those up like you plug your computer into the wall. When you tell First Energy you're going to do that, they'll get emotional if you just plug it in. They don't like that because it could screw up their grid. So we will be a place where if you're designing a solar power system, a wind power system, or one of those storage systems, that you can easily connect up to the grid and do it in a safe way. Other areas, the one next week is on Microsystems and MEMS sensors, and those are tiny, tiny little chips. I think of them as chips that do rather than chips that think. And you guys all dealt with some of those chips this morning. You probably don't know it, but the airbag sensors and all the cars you rode in here are all that way. And you have a little more fun with, if you think about how many of you guys have a Wii? More than half. Okay, you think about how amazing that technology is? Because you can beat the heck out of that, right? You drop it, your little brother, your little sister throws against the wall. I mean, what people do to these things is amazing, and they always work. And what that is that there's a number of what are called MEMS accelerometers and MEMS gyros. So there's these tiny little devices that are seeing which way you're orienting. So when you do the bowling, it knows what you're doing. In your cell phone, they're all MEMS microphones. And the reason why, it's a very, very small chip that includes a microphone and all the associated electronics that have to go with that, and they have to make them crazy, crazy cheap so they can offer cell phones at the prices that they do. There's also places where physical design and fabrication, where you might want to make a small part. And I'll give you actually a true example of one of those. We have at a community college out on the west side called Lorain County Community College, we have what's called a Fab Lab. And you can take any of you guys taken SolidWorks? Is that a product that it all? So there's programming. If any of you go into engineers, so if any of you guys are going to be engineers, you'll learn SolidWorks. I'm too old, I didn't learn it, but both my kids are engineers and they both learn SolidWorks. And you can actually design small parts and you can actually press print and it comes out with a part and it's amazing. The example they use is a crescent wrench and they literally say print and out comes a plastic crescent wrench that works, I mean, with moving parts. So my daughter works for a medical device company. And then they went off and they talked to a doctor, and she's a product manager, so she's the marketing side. She did what I did. So, and they were at a doctor, and the doctor said, I don't like this about this little plastic metal device. She called me up and she said, you know, 3 days later we went to another customer, and they had incorporated all of that doctor's changes. And she was amazed. She said, how did you do this? And he said, you know, there's this community college over on the west side that has this thing called the Fab Lab, and I just brought in my SolidWorks files, I made the changes the doctor suggested, and I pressed print and I paid for the plastic. It cost me $5. And you know, that's the kind of stuff that can really make an entrepreneur successful. And those are available, and a lot of times we just know that people just don't know. So there's some examples that I just talked about there. And actually ThinkBox at Case Western is another example. Actually, I think they have a better Fab Lab than Lorain does now. Don't tell them I said that though. So what we're talking about at TBEIC is what's called the Grid Connectivity Shared Resource Center. So the idea is that you can basically connect your products to the grid or get them ready. So the big one is that when we have our Warren facility done is we'll do that grid-enabled connectivity center. And literally, you come in and you're designing your solar system and you're saying, I want to make this connect to the grid. We're your first time trying to connect to the grid. So we'll have people who are skilled at doing that and know how to do it safely. Because if you go down to one of the better labs that we have in the whole United States in terms of grid connectivity is actually in Columbus. It's at their power company is called AEP. So it's their First Energy, if you will. But AEP will not just let just anybody come in and start using that system. And one of my questions to AEP is, well, how does somebody get there? I mean, if they can't connect up and test it with you guys, where do they go? And they didn't really have a good answer for that. So they like having the fact that your first stop should be TBEIC. And we're hoping to do that not only for the whole state, but to do that for the whole country. And actually, that's part of the economic development benefits of things like this. You think of these as, well, we're just going to do it here in Northeast Ohio. The best thing that we can do is get recognized nationally. So if a company that's in Illinois or in Oklahoma that wants to put together a grid device, wants to connect, and they come to Warren, Ohio to do that, that's good for all of us. And that's part of the concept that you kind of have to buy. It's what I call the halo effect of economic development. You do things that are good in a broad way, and good things happen to you. And we've seen it all over the country. We've seen it here, so it does work. We also look in short term. We might put this on campus at a local universities. In Warren, the closest university is the Kent State campus called the Kent State Trumbull campus, but we also have Youngstown State University. And we're talking about that storage system, so doing testing for that storage system. What you see over here on the left is actually, on the right is one of those test systems that you might use. It's not something that typically an energy entrepreneur is going to have access to. Also, when you put together any of these energy systems, believe it or not, the most complicated thing you do is what's called the power electronics. So you have this battery system. So think of a Chevy Volt. You guys are all familiar with a Chevy Volt. Pretty involved system with what it has to do. Or a Prius, even more involved system. Tremendous amount of electronics to control when are you using battery, when are you running off the gas engine, or when do you start the gas engine and the volt to start charging the battery. So how do you manage that? Well, we can provide products today if we just have space and have some money to buy the equipment for doing that battery management and power electronics. And then the last thing is the area is called Smart Grid and Home Automation Network, which is HAN. And the idea is that eventually your houses are going to be smarter. You're going to be able to say, so when, let's say, if I mentioned your parents, you know, when they pay the electric bill, it doesn't matter whether you run the washer or the dishwasher at 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, it costs you the same. Well, what if all of a sudden the power company said the same thing to your parents and to homes that they say to commercial and industrial customers, which says, if you run your dishwasher at 2 in the morning, it'll cost you this, and if you run it 2 in the afternoon, it's going to cost you that. Now you have a motivation to do some shifting of your behavior. And when that happens, you've got to be able to have a way to control that. And that's home automation. And the idea is that you can just go in and on your computer and say, all right, 2 in the morning, start the dishwasher, do the wash at 3 in the morning. I'm going to buy the electricity cheap, and I'm going to minimize my usage when a lot of other people are trying to use it. Well, that's all home automation, and there's a number of different things that you have to make that happen. So why do you do these shared resource technology centers? One, it's a great use of public and philanthropic dollars for economic development. If you want to put the money to work really quickly and be able to see results really quickly, it's a great way to do that. Two, as I mentioned, it makes resources available that just may not even be available to an entrepreneur. And those small companies, they have access to that otherwise unaffordable equipment. And I can tell you that you see some of this stuff, it is very esoteric, different kind of equipment. But what I've also seen is that large companies are now using these a lot. So a big company like an Eaton or a Rockwell Automation, you know, a manager says, and they can afford to buy this equipment, but they say, why would I? Well, if I can have access to it through this center, and that helps that center, you know, manage their costs, so it's a good thing, why wouldn't I do that? And then the economic benefits in terms of economic development, one is it gives you what I call stickiness. And if you've ever heard the marketing term stickiness, you know, for example, a very sticky company is Apple. You know, once you have an iPod and an iPad, you've got iTunes on your computer, it's sticky. It's hard for you to get rid of it and do something else. It stays with you. Well, it's the same thing. If we do things and people create their products here in Northeast Ohio, even if they come from somewhere else, they may say, we have to locate some engineers somewhere. Let's locate them at that college, or let's locate them at that center where we're using the products anyway. It gives credibility to, particularly in an area like Northeast Ohio. If you go and ask people throughout the country if Northeast Ohio is a technology area, they will not say yes. A few might, but most don't. But the goal is that 10 years from now, they say, yeah, they've got a few things they're really, really good at. Because right now, when you think high tech, where do you think in the country? West Coast, Silicon Valley. Some people might say Boston. Anybody know another one? You don't hear Ohio though, huh? Not a lot. And that's part of what we have to develop is that credibility in different areas. And we think it makes our geographical areas attractive to future growth. So what we're doing in energy also is we want to be a coalescer for entrepreneurial energy activity. So we're working on the grid connectivity stuff that I mentioned. The shale gas opportunities for the state are amazing. We have a chance to be, as a country, a net energy exporter in the next 10 years, which, that's funny, I heard that as a number that could happen right after I had heard a number of people speak at an energy conference saying that the biggest national security issue that we have in this country is energy dependence on foreign oil. So if we can become a net energy exporter because people are using our natural gas, or because we start powering cars through natural gas, it'll make a big, big difference. So we know that there's a lot of opportunities, and a lot of what has to happen is we have to be a coalescer, because there's a lot of concerns with the shale gas, especially since we're sitting on top of a lot of it, and that's that the worry is that for profit reasons, people are going to do something to really screw up the environment. So how do you manage the two? In my opinion, the Kasich administration has done a great job of putting in really, really tough regulatory controls while still saying we are going to take advantage of that. If you contrast that with New York, they just seem to be afraid to do anything. And a lot of the gas that Ohio's taking, by the way, is actually under New York. So I'm from the upstate New York, and I've told my family that, well, you guys don't seem to want your gas, so we'll take it. But we are managing it well. But there has to be a lot of public discussion, and a nonprofit like TBEIC could be the place to do that. So we see ourselves as a driver for that in general for the region. But then the last one, we're an economic driver for Warren, Trumbull County, and the Mahoney Valley. This is an area that has really not participated in a lot of what's happened in Northeast Ohio. So we see that as a role that we have to play. And it's because of that, we are actually building a building. I'm not a fan. I'm a fan of programs. I mean, usually I can get space to do what I want to do, but a big part of my Department of Energy grant says that we are going to renovate or build what's called a LEED building. And a LEED is a highly energy efficient building. And one of the things I've learned that when the government says this is the color of the money, this is what you use the money for, you pretty much have to do what they say. So, you know, we're actually taking an old Kresge department store. How many have ever heard of Kresge? Yeah, we have. How many have ever heard of Kmart? The K in Kmart is Kresge. So that started as Kresge store. So this is an old Kresge department store that was in the downtown Warren area, right on a beautiful town square, because this was just a gorgeous city at one time. And when you walk through, I mean, you can see the tiles from the 1960s. And I mean, you're walking around hoping the floor isn't going to give way. I've been told that it's okay. But we're actually renovating that to create a space, so it'll actually be in a small downtown area where you go to do this grid connectivity stuff. We will have a lot of incubator space, and what that means is one of you guys starts a company, you want to locate it, it's low cost, and you get a lot more than just space. What you're going to get is a lot of coaching and help as well. You'll have the experts there, but you'll also have that shared resource technology center there. And a big part of this, that last bullet on the slide, is that it's a big part of that area's of Warren's revitalization and growth. So for the local community, so for example, I have to go to Warren on Wednesday to do nothing but get my picture taken because we're having an announcement about something, but it's a big deal. And I'm not from Warren, I'm from Lake County. But it's a big deal for that community to be able to take advantage. When these things happen and they occur in a local area, it's its own little economic driver, and they really need some help along those lines. So some of the things that we've done recently is we've actually sponsored fleet conversion seminars with municipalities. So this is we're cities who drive lots and lots of cars, and they're fairly defined. It isn't like with your car at home, well, you might just drive it to work every day in 10 miles, and a Volt is great, but you also might have to take long trips, and so it's not as good. Well, certainly a pure electric car is not as good. But when you're talking about fleets, they know how many miles they drive every day. So their opportunity to convert to natural gas, because they can actually have here, right in this complex, you could have a natural gas filling station for all of the Brecksville, Broadview Heights, Independence kind of area pretty easily. So we talked to municipalities about how this might work and how they can take advantage of what's happening with shale gas. Just to give you a sense, today if you used natural gas for cars, and the conversion is incredibly easy, it's the equivalent of $1.70 a gallon. So for the same amount of energy. The only problem you get is the trunks. You need a lot more trunk space. Physically, it takes a lot more space, but it's like getting the gas at $1.70 a gallon. So you look at the gas that a municipality uses, it's a big deal. And so we sponsored the seminar with Chesapeake Energy and a number of other people to say this is how you would do it as a municipality. You can kind of see that's the kind of thing that we would do. We also brought universities, so Case Western, Cleveland State, University of Akron, Kent State, Youngstown State, and others together to talk about water resources. It turns out that Northeast Ohio has this little quiet cluster of water-oriented companies. You know, a company like Connecticut, which is in Geauga County, is known throughout the country as one of the best water management companies in the world, and there's tons of them. So we actually brought them together that are doing research with the companies to kind of talk about how they can kind of make this, turn into something that's useful. And as I mentioned, we coach companies for JumpStart. That's something I've done a lot of. I've done a lot of company coaching. And so now we're doing it on an official basis. So when JumpStart gets a company in the energy space, they immediately call myself or the person I'm working with here in Warren. We talked a little bit about these shared resource technology centers, a little bit about incubators, and maybe a little bit also about just economic development in general. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.